The stench of chemicals hung thick in the air, heavy and suffocating. Beneath the broken wall of an abandoned factory, a tiny German Shepherd puppy lay trapped in a pool of hardened black tar. His fur was glued to the ground, every movement met with the cruel pull of sticky asphalt that tore at his fragile skin. His eyes, wide and desperate, shimmered with silent screams no one seemed to hear. Flies buzzed over his matted body as he whimpered, too weak to fight anymore. Each shallow breath carried flecks of tar into his nostrils, making him choke and cough. The sun beat down mercilessly, baking the black surface around him, and with every passing minute, the trap grew tighter. If no one came soon, the tar would not just hold him, it would suffocate him. Then faint footsteps echoed in the silence, crunching against gravel. A shadow fell across the broken yard, and the puppy's ears twitched at the sound. A man stopped in his tracks, his eyes widening as he saw the trembling figure half buried in the black pool. His voice cracked in disbelief. My God, how long has he been like this? Before we continue, tell us where you're watching from, and if this journey touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story of loyalty. The man's name was Miguel Alvarez, a factory worker heading home after a long shift. His boots crunched against the gravel as he moved, cautiously toward the pit, his heart tightening at the sight before him. The puppy's tiny body was plastered to the black surface, its limbs spread awkwardly, unable to move. Miguel's throat went dry. He had seen many things in his life, but never something this cruel. The German Shepherd pup whimpered weakly, his cries barely audible over the buzzing flies and the hum of the empty factory walls. Miguel crouched, low, the sharp odor of tar burning his nose as he studied the scene. The pup's fur was stiff with hardened asphalt, patches of skin already rubbed raw where he had tried to struggle free. "Who could leave you like this?" Miguel whispered, anger mixing with sorrow. Miguel had worked at this factory years ago before it was shut down. It had once been a hub of industry, but when the owners left, they abandoned more than machines. They left behind pits of toxic waste, barrels of leaking chemicals, and pools of tar that baked in the sun. For years, stray animals had fallen, victim to these traps, and now this tiny shepherd was the latest casualty. The puppy had not always been alone. Days earlier, he had been one of a small litter born beneath a crumbling shed at the edge of town. His mother, already frail and malnourished, had struggled to feed them, scavenging for scraps wherever she could. One morning, in her desperate search for food, the pup had wandered after her, his tiny legs carrying him farther than his siblings. That was when he stumbled into the tar pit. At first, he had managed to keep his head above the sticky surface, but as he struggled, his paws sank deeper. The more he cried and thrashed, the tighter the tar clung to him. Hours passed, and the sun turned the black pool into a burning plate, searing his skin and draining his strength. By the time Miguel found him, the pup had almost given up, his eyes glazed with exhaustion. Miguel's mind raced as he crouched beside the pit. The tar clung to the pup's tiny chest, and each breath seemed shallower than the last. If the substance hardened further, it would choke him completely. Miguel's hands hovered uncertainly above the puppy, his instincts screaming to act, but his fear holding him still. What if pulling him out tore his skin? What if the shock killed him? He reached for his phone, fumbling with trembling fingers to call the nearest animal rescue. The storm crackling in the distance made the connection weak, each ring dragging like an eternity. Finally, a voice answered, but Miguel's heart sank when he was told the team could not reach the site for at least an hour. The roads were blocked, and they were stretched thin with other emergencies. He was on his own. The puppy whimpered again, his body twitching weakly. Miguel's jaw clenched as he shoved his phone back into his pocket, his eyes scanning the yard for anything useful. He spotted an old metal drum leaning against the wall, its surface rusted and broken. Nearby lay a half-empty bottle of cooking oil discarded by the workers long ago. An idea sparked, fragile but desperate. If he could loosen the tar's grip, maybe, just maybe, he could free him. Miguel dipped his hands into the oil, coating his fingers before gently rubbing it along the edges of the pup's fur. The smell was sharp and the pup whimpered louder at the touch, but Miguel murmured softly, "Shh, easy, pequeño. I'm here." Slowly, painfully, he began to work at the sticky bonds holding the puppy down. Each tug made his stomach clench, fearing he would rip fragile skin, but he pressed on. As he worked, Miguel's mind wandered back to his own childhood. He remembered the shepherd his family once had, a loyal companion named Sombra, who had stood by his side through every hardship. She had grown old protecting them, and when she passed, Miguel swore he would never love another dog again. It hurt. Too much to lose. Yet now, looking into the eyes of this tiny pup, he felt Sombra's spirit urging him on. The tar clung stubbornly, resisting every effort. Miguel's arms ached as he worked, his breath coming in ragged gasps as sweat mixed with rain. The pup's whimpers grew weaker, his eyelids fluttering as though he were slipping into unconsciousness. Panic clawed at Miguel's chest, his voice rising in desperation. "Stay with me, don't you dare give up now." Every minute felt like an hour as Miguel fought against the black prison that held the puppy. At last, with one final, careful tug, the pup's front leg came free, coated in thick tar but still intact. Miguel exhaled sharply, tears stinging his eyes. "That's it. That's it, you're fighting," he whispered, his hands trembling as he continued to work. But time was running out. Dark clouds gathered overhead, and the first drops of rain began to fall, sending ripples across the black surface of the pit. Miguel's stomach twisted as he realized what would happen if the rain grew stronger. The tar would spread like liquid, swallowing the tiny body completely. He had freed one limb, but the rest remained trapped and the storm was closing in. Miguel's heart pounded as thunder rolled across the horizon. He tightened his grip on the puppy's tiny frame, his voice a fierce whisper against the storm. "I won't let you die here. Not like this." But even as determination surged through him, the first flash of lightning revealed something that froze him in place. Another pair of glowing eyes watching from the shadows of the ruined factory. The storm cracked open above them, lightning, tearing through the sky as rain began to fall in heavy sheets. Miguel shielded the puppy with his body, but the tar pit hissed under the sudden downpour, the surface loosening dangerously. What had once hardened into a cage was now shifting like quicksand, threatening to swallow the tiny shepherd whole. Miguel's pulse raced. He had freed one fragile limb, but the rest of the pup was still bound fast. The glowing eyes in the shadows blinked once, then moved. Miguel's heart jumped as a stray dog, ragged and skeletal, crept forward from the ruins of the factory. Its ribs showed through patchy fur, and its gaze was sharp with hunger and suspicion. The animal circled the clearing, its body tense, every muscle coiled as if deciding whether to fight for the struggling pup or flee into the storm. Miguel raised his voice above the rain, shouting, "Vete, get away!" His arms swung wide, splashing mud in the stray's direction. For a moment the intruder halted, growling low, but another crash of thunder sent it slinking back into the darkness. Miguel's shoulders sagged with fleeting relief, but his eyes dropped again to the puppy, whose whimpers had grown weaker under the weight of the storm. The tar spread with every drop, creeping higher against the pup's sides, clinging to his fragile chest. Miguel plunged his hands into the slick black mess, his fingers burning from the chemicals. He tried to peel it back with the oil, but the mixture only made the ground slicker, his grip slipping with every desperate tug. "Come on, pequeño, fight with me," he begged, his voice trembling. The puppy's eyes fluttered, half closing, his breath shallow and ragged. Miguel's stomach twisted as panic rose in his chest. He could feel the life draining from the tiny body. Thunder roared again, and in that deafening moment, he thought he heard the sound of footsteps behind him. He froze, twisting his head toward the ruins, but the storm swallowed the sound before he could be sure. He forced himself to keep working, his hands shaking as he coated the tar with the last drops of oil. Inch by inch, he freed the second front. Paw, the sticky strands stretching like dark ropes before snapping apart. The puppy whimpered, too weak to move, but Miguel felt hope surge through him. "That's it. We're winning," he whispered, though fear still gnawed at the edges of his resolve, but the storm showed no mercy. The pit overflowed with rainwater, turning the tar into a deadly slurry that clung even tighter to the pup's hind legs. Miguel's boots sank into the muck as he pulled, his arms straining until his muscles burned. The puppy gave a feeble cry, his body twitching violently before falling frighteningly still. Miguel's breath caught, his heart lurching. No, no, no! Not now! Desperation surged as Miguel pressed his ear close, listening for breath. A faint rasp answered, but it was fading fast. Rage and sorrow collided inside him as he shouted into the storm, his voice raw. "You will not die here. Not like this." He braced his foot against the rim of the pit, gripping the pup's frail frame with both hands, ready to tear him free no matter the cost. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the ruins around them, and in that blinding flash Miguel saw movement. Again, a second dog, larger, darker, and gaunt, emerged from the shadows, its teeth bared, its eyes glinting with hunger. It snarled, edging closer, the storm casting its silhouette like a phantom of the night. Miguel's grip tightened on the pup, as dread sank into his bones. He was fighting the tar, the storm, and now the threat of another predator circling closer. The larger stray crept closer, its growl vibrating low through the storm, a predator's hunger sharpened by days without food. Miguel's body tensed as he hunched protectively over the tar-covered puppy, his own voice breaking into a desperate shout. "Stay back!" The wind carried his words away, but the menace in his eyes held firm. He had no weapon, only his body, his hands, and his will. For a heartbeat, the stray's snarling gaze shifted to the motionless pup. Miguel's chest clenched as he realized the truth. The predator wasn't just after him. It smelled weakness, death, and the helpless cries of newborn life. The puppy whimpered faintly, his tiny chest rattling with each shallow breath. The sound seemed to fuel the stray's hunger, its body inching closer, mud splashing beneath its paws. Miguel's pulse thundered as he scanned the shadows for anything, any tool, any weapon. His fingers brushed against a jagged piece of wood, half buried in the tar. He grabbed it, raising the makeshift stake between himself and the stray, his stance unsteady but unyielding. "Over my dead body," he whispered, his voice lost to the storm but clear in his resolve. Just then, the tar beneath the pup shifted again, bubbles of rainwater rising like a cauldron ready to consume. Miguel's eyes widened as he understood the second danger. Time wasn't just running out, it was gone. If the tar spread any further, it would flood the pup's nostrils and lungs. Every second mattered, and hesitation meant death. And then Miguel saw it, something that made his blood run cold. As lightning tore through the sky, illuminating the puppy's body, he noticed the faint outline of scars beneath the tar. They weren't from the pit. They were older, raw, and cruelly deliberate. The pup hadn't just fallen here by accident. Someone had thrown him into the pit, left him to die slowly, swallowed by poison and storms. His chest heaved with rage as the realization burned inside him. This wasn't neglect. This was punishment. Somewhere out there, someone had deemed this fragile life unworthy, had chosen cruelty over mercy. Miguel's throat closed as he looked down at the tiny shepherd, trembling and broken, and whispered, fiercely, "You didn't choose this. They did this to you." The stray lunged suddenly, its teeth flashing in the stormlight. Miguel swung the jagged wood with all his strength, striking the mud just inches from its face. The animal recoiled with a snarl, circling once before slinking back into the shadows. Relief crashed over him, but it was short-lived. The pup coughed, violently, black tar frothing at his mouth, his tiny body convulsing. Miguel's heart stopped as he realized the final truth. The pup wasn't just trapped, he was poisoned. Tear had seeped into his lungs, into his skin, stealing his strength from the inside. It wasn't enough to free him. If Miguel didn't get him to a vet soon, the fight would be lost. He braced his foot against the rim of the pit, gripping the pup's frail body, ready to tear him free even if it ripped his own hands to shreds. Miguel planted his boots against the slick rim of the pit, the storm hammering down on his back. His fingers sank deep into the tar, burning from the chemicals as he dug around the puppy's fragile frame. The little shepherd whimpered faintly, his eyes half closed, tar bubbling at his nostrils with every shallow breath. "No, pequeño, stay with me," Miguel begged, his voice hoarse with fear. The tar clung like black chains, stretching and snapping in sticky strands each time Miguel pulled. His muscles screamed with effort, the storm soaking him to the bone. But he didn't. Let go. He could feel the puppy's heartbeat, weak, uneven, but still there, fluttering against his palm. That fragile rhythm became his only anchor, the sound he refused to let fade into silence. With one final, desperate heave, the pup's hind legs tore free, coated in thick tar but intact. Miguel collapsed backward into the mud, cradling the limp body against his chest. For a terrifying second, the pup lay motionless, his chest frighteningly still. Miguel's tears mixed with rain as he pressed his mouth close, whispering, "Breathe. Please, breathe." The puppy twitched, coughing violently, thick clots of tar spewing from his tiny mouth. His weak cry pierced the storm, the sound more beautiful than any music Miguel had ever heard. Relief crashed over him, his chest shaking with sobs as he wrapped the fragile body in his jacket. But even in that fragile victory, fear gnawed at him. The poison of the tar was already inside. Miguel staggered to his feet, clutching the pup tight, scanning the ruined yard for a way out. The storm turned the ground to sludge, every step dragging. Like lead, but he refused to slow. His vision blurred, his lungs burned, but his arms held firm around the trembling bundle. "You fought for me," he whispered. "Now I'll fight for you." As he stumbled past the factory wall, lightning split the sky, revealing the stray lurking once more at the edge of the shadows. Its hungry eyes tracked him, but Miguel bared his teeth, shouting fiercely into the storm. "Not tonight!" His roar and the thunder merged, and the predator melted back into the ruins, leaving only the sound of Miguel's pounding heart. He burst through the factory gates and onto the road, his boots splashing through rivers of rainwater. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the storm, and Miguel waved frantically. With one free arm, the car screeched to a halt, the driver leaping out in shock as he saw the tar-covered bundle in Miguel's arms. "Hospital," Miguel shouted, his voice breaking. "He won't make it without help." The driver yanked the passenger door open, and Miguel slid inside, clutching the pup close as the engine roared. The little shepherd whimpered again, his cries faint, his tiny chest fluttering like a candle about to go out. Miguel pressed his forehead to the pup's sticky fur, whispering, "Hold on, pequeño. Just a little longer." The storm raged behind them as the car sped into the night, carrying them toward the last fragile hope of survival. The clinic doors burst open as Miguel stumbled inside, rainwater pooling beneath his boots. Nurses gasped at the sight of the tar-covered puppy limp in his arms. "He's barely breathing," Miguel cried, his voice cracking as he laid the fragile body on the stainless steel table. The vet, a woman with sharp eyes and steady hands, rushed forward, barking orders to her team. Scissors sliced through the sticky fur as gloved hands worked quickly, applying solvents to loosen the hardened tar. The pup whimpered faintly, his chest rattling with each shallow breath. Machines beeped urgently as wires were connected, monitoring a heartbeat so faint it nearly disappeared. Miguel stood frozen at the table's edge, his fists clenched, every instinct screaming to do more. The vet's voice cut through the chaos. "He's poisoned. The tar's in his lungs. We have to act fast." Tubes were slipped into his nose, oxygen hissing as his tiny body convulsed against the invasion. Miguel pressed his forehead to the cold metal edge of the table, whispering broken prayers. He had pulled the pup from the pit, but now science and fate would decide whether that fight was enough. The first injection slid into the puppy's vein, flushing antidotes and fluids into his fragile body. He twitched, then stilled, his chest frighteningly still for a moment too long. "Stay with me," Miguel shouted, his voice raw as his hand closed around the pup's paw. It was sticky and frail, but when Miguel squeezed, the tiniest tremor answered back. That spark of connection shattered his despair. The room held its breath as the vet massaged the pup's chest, urging air into his lungs. Seconds dragged like hours until at last, a faint cry broke through, weak but alive. The sound filled the clinic like a hymn, pulling tears down Miguel's face. His grip on the paw tightened as he whispered, "That's it, pequeño. Keep fighting. I'm right. Here." One by one, the nurses cleaned the last of the tar, wrapping the pup in warm towels. His breath steadied slightly, though each one came with effort, each one fragile as glass. Miguel sat at his side, refusing to leave, his hand never breaking contact. He knew that this wasn't victory, it was survival bought by inches, but in those inches, hope lived. The vet finally exhaled, her voice soft but firm. "He's not safe yet, but he's fighting. That's more than most would have done." Miguel nodded, brushing a trembling hand over the pup's head. "He's not alone anymore," he whispered, his heart binding itself to the fragile life before him. In that sterile room, surrounded by storm-soaked silence, a bond was sealed stronger than tar could ever hold. Dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and gray. Inside the clinic, silence replaced the chaos of the night, broken only by the faint beeping of machines. The German Shepherd puppy lay wrapped in clean white towels, his tiny chest rising and falling with fragile effort. Miguel sat nearby, exhaustion heavy in his bones, but his eyes never left the pup. The vet entered quietly, her steps soft as if not to disturb the fragile peace. She studied the chart, then looked at Miguel with a tired but gentle smile. "He made it through the night," she said, her voice low. "But he's still weak. It will take time before we know if his lungs recover fully." Miguel swallowed, hard, relief and fear colliding inside him. The puppy stirred faintly, letting out a weak whimper that pulled Miguel forward instantly. He reached out, brushing a gentle finger over the pup's head, whispering, "You're safe now. Never again will you fight alone." For a moment, the pup's paw twitched, pressing weakly into his hand, a fragile gesture of trust. That single movement was enough to bring tears to Miguel's tired eyes. But the night had left scars. Despite the vet's efforts, patches of fur were gone where tar had burned the skin, and breathing would be difficult for weeks. Miguel bowed his head, grief heavy for the suffering this tiny life had endured. Yet when he lifted his gaze again, it was with renewed resolve. "You've already beaten death," he whispered, "and now we'll face the rest together." By morning, word of the rescue had spread through town. Neighbors who once avoided the abandoned factory now stood outside the clinic, murmuring in awe at the story of the puppy who survived the tar pit. To them, it was a tale of cruelty exposed and compassion restored. But for Miguel, it was something more personal, a promise renewed, a second chance at loyalty he thought he had lost long. As the sun climbed higher, Miguel gently lifted the pup into his arms. His jacket still bore stains of tar and blood, but it now carried warmth and life against his chest. The pup stirred softly, eyes fluttering open just long enough to meet Miguel's. In that silent exchange, man and dog sealed a bond born from suffering, forged in the fire of survival, and destined to last a lifetime. The morning light spilled across the clinic yard, washing away the horrors of the night. Miguel stood at the doorway, the puppy cradled carefully in his arms, his tiny breaths warming against Miguel's chest. Around them, the storm's destruction lay scattered, but inside that fragile heartbeat was proof that life could still rise from ruin. The tar that once imprisoned him was gone, replaced by hope that clung fiercely to survival. Miguel whispered softly, almost to himself, "You were thrown away to die, yet you fought to live." The puppy's paw shifted weakly against his jacket, as if answering the unspoken vow between them. He was no longer just a stray covered in tar. He was a survivor, a warrior in miniature, and Miguel's companion from this day forward. Their bond had been born in fire, storm, and suffering, but it would grow in love and loyalty. Stories like this remind us that cruelty can destroy, but compassion can heal what cruelty tries to erase. One act of mercy can turn despair into hope, and one rescued life can change two hearts forever.